I really relate to today's guest. I was thinking back of when I was in my teen years, and I always felt like I was never good at sports. And looking back now, I realized that was probably a mental block that I had, a perception that I had, but I just saw myself as not really being good at anything. It wasn't until I started doing marathons in my 40s and then bodybuilding shows in my 50s that I went, oh, wow, maybe that perception wasn't 100% reality. Well, today I have with me Logan Christopher. Logan was never naturally strong or necessarily an athletic person, but he started getting into body weight training around age 18 and became inspired by the strongman entertainment community, which is really people pulling off these amazing feats of strength. Logan is a modern day strongman. He can juggle flaming kettlebells, pull fire trucks by his hair, support a half-ton weight on his neck, tear a deck of cards in half. We were just talking about that, and lift over 1,000 pounds in a rack pull. He is pushing the potential of human endurance naturally, but he's also redefining the health of women, and in particular, midlife women. In 2012, he co-founded Lost Empire Herbs. It's a company dedicated to hormonal health, blending herbalism with ancient natural wisdom. With a strong emphasis on women's wellness, the brand focuses on enhancing immunity, boosting energy, managing stress, and supporting menstrual and reproductive health. Logan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on, Carol.
So I want to dive into your backstory, but first of all, for the sake of the listeners, what is a strongman? Because we were talking off camera about how my husband and I know somebody that did this, and he stopped because he had to get so big and eat so much it reached the point of being unhealthy.
Right. Yeah, when most people hear the word strongman today, what they're thinking of is the modern strongman like on ESPN, where they have strongman competitions, the strongest man in the world. And in general, these people are very large, 300 pounds plus. Some of the strongman competitions have weight classes, but really at that high level, that is what people are going for, because having that mass can help with a lot of the feats that they're doing there. So that is the modern strongman. What I am doing is the old time strongman. So this was back around the vaudeville era. Strongman was instead a form of entertainment rather than a competition. I know people are entertained watching those competitions, but instead it was a show where there was the performance of feat of strength, just to be like, wow, it get this across to people. So the strongman that I've done, although I've dabbled in the modern strongman a little bit, is more that feat of strength and entertainment based. So ripping decks of cards, bending horseshoes, bending nails, doing death-defying feats of strength. That is more along this old-time thing, which is, for the most part, a lost art. There are a few people that are doing this, but most people have never seen a strongman of this kind of caliber going around today. So there's few of us around.
So did you train like primarily with sort of gymnastic type body weight exercises that use your own bodies? Because I've seen this. I know somebody at the gym and he's built about like you, but he's amazingly strong. And he does these incredible things at the gym just with his body weight.
Yeah. So I definitely do a mix of different training types. What I've found is like every tool and methodology kind of has advantages and disadvantages to it. So doing bodyweight training versus lifting barbells, they're both good. You can get both strong and fit with both of them, but there are different advantages and disadvantages to each. So by mixing different types of training, you're able to basically get all the benefits without having the downsides, except that, you may lose your focus by doing so many different things. So I've definitely done some gymnastic training, and a big part of my training kind of all the time is bodyweight training. So I've done freestanding, full range handstand push-ups, all kinds of different feats, backflips before. And yeah, that was a big part of my training. But I've also lifted kettlebells, lifted barbells, worked with a variety of odd objects and special things like, if you're going to tear decks of cards, you need a tear decks of cards.
Yeah, for the listeners, to tear a deck of cards, if you really think about that, that is grip strength, and we talk a lot about grip strength being associated with longevity, so that's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah.
So you're this teenager and you don't really feel like you're athletic, maybe you're not that big, kind of skinny. Why strongman? I mean, what brought you that direction?
Well, it's funny because I played football in high school, but the reason I played was because my brother was like a football star and he kind of pushed me into it. And even though I hated it, I played for 4 years just because I had so much shame and couldn't quit. Which is really, kind of sad to think about. But even though I did some training in throughout football, like they had us doing strength training, I really was the classic hard gainer. I didn't have much in the way of results. It wasn't until after high school that it happened to be the same brother, but he told me about this guy who was really into body weight training, and I kind of started learning from that. And doing the body weight training instead of going to the gym, just for whatever reason, this kind of hooked me much more. I think part of it was I stumbled into like the keys of progressive training. What I was doing in the gym, I was like missing some of the foundational things that really would have led to it being successful. Whereas while thinking it was the magic of bodyweight training, and I do believe bodyweight training is well worth doing, but I kind of stumbled into these foundational principles of like progressive training and like focusing on goals and different things. And this way, I started to actually see results in my fitness.
Okay, so you use a different types of modalities, like you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, like the barbell, the dumbbell, your body weight, combining all of these things. I know that the gentleman I know at the gym will not lift weights because he kept getting injured
Right.
and he got tired of the injuries. And he said, you know what? I don't get injured when I use my body weight. It comes more naturally.
Yeah, that is one of the benefits of it is a lot of people do move from weights to body weight. Another benefit of that is it tends to bring you inside your body, building a little bit more awareness. Like if you're lifting something external to you, you can be a little more externally focused on that. Whereas if your body weight is the resistance, it helps to bring that focus internally. And this can be useful to people. That being said, I'm a big proponent of listening to your body. And if you really, everyone's heard that concept, listen to your body, but there's actually like processes or ways you can do this to really understand kind of the language of the body, which is movement. And using this as a guide is easier to avoid injuries. I'm not going to say it never happens, but then when you get them, they're kind of minor and you can actually rehab them quite easily. And this may involve using weights or body weight.
Listening to your body. I can relate to that because, I started out in the marathon running,
Mm-hmm.
which came more naturally for me because I was thin, naturally thin, small person, small boned person. I could really take off and go fast running. And then I went into bodybuilding, which is what,
Very different than marathon
yeah,
running.
but it gave me the physique I have now, which I did not have from running. Obviously, it wasn't what I wanted, especially as I got closer to 50. But I injured myself. I injured my back pretty severely by trying to get this bulk and this mass that my body just, I think frankly, I'm very small boned, it just could not handle that heavy barbell on my skeletal system. And I had good form. I was working with a trainer. It wasn't that. But I don't think I was so focused on this goal that I was pushing my body to do something that really genetically it's not inclined to do.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point is you have to kind of find what your body is built for. So me, I as I said, I'm the classic hard gainer. I'm 6'2", I'm tall and lanky, long limbs. This does not really lend itself very well to weightlifting or gymnastic stuff. So in some ways, like there can be some advantage with bucking the trend, but also there's definitely advantage with looking and finding what are your strong suits, like what's gonna work for you. For me, for instance, like I'm a pretty smart guy, so an area that I went into big time was the mental training. And again, looking at like everyone knows, like you have to believe in yourself, right? But these refrains really don't help people for the most part. Maybe a little bit of encouragement, but then it fades away. Compare this to doing step by step processes using something like visualization or hypnosis, where we can really use the mental training aspects to deliver results right there. I really love the mental training stuff because you can kind of see instant results. I'll take you through a visualization, and if you did like 8 reps before in something, you can suddenly do 10. So the mind is a very powerful part, and I credit a lot of my success in doing this stuff to really focusing on the mental training aspect of it.
I think that's huge. I think if you don't have that mental component, there's no way you're going to move to that next step. It's a block, like I talked about at the beginning of the podcast. I think I had a huge mental block, told myself all these stories that weren't necessarily true. I didn't even know where these stories came from. They were just in my head. And once I got past that, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can do athletic things. I do have this strength that I didn't know that I had. Such a huge part. I talk about visualization on here a lot. That's what bodybuilding taught me. You don't get on that stage
Hmm.
unless you first see yourself on that stage. It's the only way. And then it keeps you on the goal because you know you're getting on that stage. You don't back out. You don't cheat. You don't do these other things that are going to take you away from the goal.
Hmm.
Just super important to have your head in the game. And you talked about hypnosis. I want to dive into that because people tend to think of what they've seen like in Vegas at the
Right.
shows or whatever. And I actually did go through hypnosis. A lot of people don't know this, but my second competition, I wanted to win so badly. And I realized my mind was
Hmm.
blocking me. I'm an introvert. I'm not a stage person. So I was terrified. And I actually went to someone and went through this whole process. We developed these index cards. This was her process. And I drove around town with these index cards at every light saying certain, they were affirmations
Hmm.
essentially.
Yep.
It was pretty powerful. Like I
Hmm.
won that competition.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a wide variety of tools from affirmations, visualizations, hypnosis. I really like hypnosis as a tool because it allows you to relatively easily and quickly kind of dive in deeper and begin working with the subconscious. So using affirmations, using visualization while under a light hypnotic trance just kind of magnifies the results. It also tends to make it easier. A lot of people say I'm not good at visualizing, and that may be the case, but it's a skill for one thing, so you can kind of practice it and get better. But even if you don't have just the visual sense, you can still feel internally within the body like having a knowing or the physical component. So there's a whole lot that goes into that, and absolutely, it's definitely powerful. I actually did hypnotize people on stage one time. It
Did
was
you
at
really?
a strength and health conference, and I hypnotized them to be stronger at pressing a kettlebell. So doing a kettlebell press, and we did it in a sort of self placebo controlled fashion. I had them use their stronger arm and press and do as many reps as they could comfortably do. Then I led them through a quick hypnosis. It only took like 8 minutes or so, which included visualization and it included the embedded commands, which would be kind of the equivalent of affirmations, and then had them press with their weaker side. And not everybody, but I think I had about 8 people on the stage, and several of them set all-time PRs. Several of them did significantly better than they had on the other side. So the power of hypnosis is really real, and it's definitely a tool worth investigating for a wide variety of things. So you can use it right to get stronger in that exercise in the moment, or you can use it like you did to help prepare for a competition, deal with the head trash or the self-limiting beliefs that are in the way. Wide variety of different uses for it.
Now, what about this notion that some people can't be hypnotized? We hear this all the time.
Mhm.
Oh, only people who are susceptible and they're the only ones who can be hypnotized.
Yeah, is again, people are often thinking in terms of that state hypnosis where a person would never be able to get me to cluck like a chicken, right? But if the goal of hypnosis when you're doing it for self empowerment, like you want to go along with the person. So everyone can get into a hypnotic state because there's a lot of parallels between just drifting off to sleep or daydreaming or even watching TV because the brain waves change. So everyone is hypnotizable. It just, there is a difference in degree. While some people can go into like a crazy trance and not remember anything, other people may just get into a light trance, but it still can be useful in this way for the things that we're talking about here. We're not necessarily trying to shoot for the moon in our hypnosis, but just to help with fitness goals or competitions, it absolutely can be done for anyone. And in
Yeah,
fact, a lot of the people that think they're like too smart for hypnosis actually end up making great hypnotic subjects.
that's funny. I know with me, I never really lost full awareness. She took me through a process. It was like a step-by-step process that got me very relaxed and
Hmm.
into I guess, a trance-like state where I could really access these things in my mind. But it wasn't like I lost awareness of the room or the chair or her. I was always pretty much grounded there in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's people have a lot of preconceptions about what hypnosis is, and they often have never actually done the process of going through it. But again, it is really akin to states we get into without a hypnotist being present all throughout our life. So it's quite common.
So you have this background in hypnotizing to mind work to really get to the goal. Where did the herbs how in the world did you get into herbs?
Yeah, so as I was getting into fitness and decided I wanted to do this strongman thing, it just kind of grabbed me. So, because I wasn't naturally strong or athletic, it meant that I was on the search for things that would help give me the edge, help kind of boost my capabilities. So, that led me into the whole mental training field and everything involved with that. But it also led me into health and nutrition. And with the nutrition, that kind of led to herbs. For me, the first workout I heard about Olympic athletes were using this cordyceps fungus and they're breaking records. They had some amazing results with it. So I got some, I tried it. And then when I was doing kettlebell swings or snatches or whatever I was working on at that time, I noticed more energy, that my breathing was a little bit easier. So from that very first workout, I was hooked on it. Now, this is a very different route to herbs than most people take. They usually end up with herbs if they end up there at all because Western medicine has failed them. They have some sort of ailment. They're trying to work with them this way. And by all means, there's definitely some great stuff there. But really, my focus with herbs was on this performance in the first place with the workouts, of course. But then that led to other areas like, oh, can I improve my cognition, my memory, my focus to be able to work better? Can I improve any other area of my life? And we have a saying at my company, there's an herb for that. Like whatever you're looking for, there actually is something that can kind of help you in some way, help you with that kind of function, that part of your life.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that.
Hmm.
I kinda got into it in my 30s, but I didn't know what I was doing, and somebody said, "Oh, you gotta get this Bible of herbs," I think it was called. It was like this thick book, but then I got scared because you read through and it tells, what it can do for you, but then it tells what happens if you get too much with some of these, like,
Hmm.
okay, you could have kidney problems or liver problems or whatever. How did you learn to safely incorporate them?
Yeah, so the way that I got introduced to herbs was really through a Taoist system of superior herbalisms. Most people have heard of Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, but kind of a part of that was the Taoists. These were the guys and women that were really seeking immortality and doing things like Qigong and various practices, but working with herbs as well. What the Taoists, they classified herbs in these different ways. There were the superior herbs, the general or middle herbs, and then the inferior herbs. Inferior herbs are the ones that you would use when you were sick, had some sort of disease that could be curative and could help you. But these ones tended to come with more side effects, right? And this is kind of what we see with Western medicine and a lot of drugs. Yeah, in some cases they absolutely can help, but there is a long list of side effects you got to be aware of too, right? With the superior herbs, these were just the cream of the crop of herbs in the world in that area in China when they were kind of devising this. There's only a select few of these herbs. Like the list of inferior herbs was much longer, but the superior herbs, only a few got put into this class. And one of the things about these was that they were really quite safe. They weren't likely to throw you out of balance in any sort of way, to cause any sort of problems, even if you took them every day of your life for the rest of your life. This was one of the things that made it a superior herb, is that it wasn't necessarily treating disease, which of course we can't do in modern society anyway, but instead these are ones that supported radiant health. Just you're already healthy and they help to take your health to even another level. And this really fit in line with my thinking as far as performance, right? I'm not trying to treat disease in what I have going for me. I just want to have better workouts. I want to recover better. I want to be faster, more powerful, these sort of things. And these herbs working with us, it's not as likely to cause any of those problems. So just by focusing on the best, you don't have to worry about the rest.
Interesting. I like the classifications make it a
Hmm.
lot more clear, rather than, just pulling out what I did, the manual and not knowing what I'm looking at and what does what and how much to take. So that's really helpful. Now you actually help with hormonal balance with these for both men and women, I'm assuming. What type of herbs are useful for women in midlife? So first of all, we have that perimenopausal window, so much different than menopause, because menopause, I kind of think of it as like everything flatlines, like everything dives down, your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone. But perimenopause is this, it's the up and down.
Right.
What is useful for bringing balance for a woman in that time period of life?
Yes. So women's hormones are definitely more complex than men's. Men's is relatively easy. Men kind of exist more on a daily cycle, whereas women have the month or the month. cycle, just more based on that. And with those swings, it does add complexities to it. Kind of three of the main sex hormones that you're looking at is, as you said, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. Now, a lot of women get scared of the word testosterone. They think they're going to automatically look like a bodybuilder. But even though women have 1/10 the amount of testosterone men do, I say it's actually just as important for a woman as it is for a man. It's just a smaller amount. And a lot of women are actually low in testosterone. This is becoming more of a thing in kind of medical circles, that women are getting their testosterone tested and treated by doctors. It's definitely a rising thing. So it's good that that awareness is growing. I'm just a person that I lean toward more natural things. There's a time and place for a hormone replacement, but if we can work with natural things, there's less likely to be side effects and lower costs and that sort of thing. That's just my own personal philosophy. So looking at these different hormones can definitely be useful. The thing, in addition to that, I'd say cortisol is going to be a big thing, because with cortisol, the stress hormone, I think that's a little bit of a misnomer, because cortisol is actually like the cleanup crew for stress. Like, you have too much stress in your life, cortisol is trying to handle that. So it's not that we want to get rid of cortisol. It's that when it's chronically elevated too high, that means there's too much stress going on in your life. And this can be physical stress and mental stress. Even if you don't necessarily feel stressed, your body may be stressed. That's an important point I want people to know, is that we have all kinds of stressors, from endocrine disrupting chemicals, our diet, all sorts of things going on that we may not like feel stressed mentally, but that doesn't mean it's not actually happening to our body. So with cortisol, this is going to be stealing the starter material to make all those sex hormones. It's called pregnenolone steal. So we have cholesterol, which comes from diet. It's also something that our body can create. It's actually very important to us. So a lot of people getting hooked on that low cholesterol thing. There are some problems that come with that. But cholesterol turns into pregnenolone, which will turn into progesterone, which gets converted into DHEA, and then testosterone, which gets converted into the estrogen and the different forms of that. So this is the complex biology. But the thing to understand is, if we have too much stress, the body kind of prioritizes cleaning up the stress with the cortisol first. And what is important for that is, if you have too much stress, it goes to cortisol, and then it is not helping. You don't have enough of the material in order to make the other hormones. Try to get the camera back here.
Don't you just love technology?
Yeah.
Last week for me, it was my mic. Not one mic in the house would work properly for me. I don't know what was going on, but yeah, it is what it is. No, you gave a really good explanation there, because, like you mentioned, the cholesterol, that they're beginning to realize it's not quite as simplistic as we once thought, and really that's how we are producing, many hormones, is through cholesterol. People don't understand. They think, oh, that's bad. It's like cortisol. They think, oh, that's
Yeah.
bad, but
It's always that simplified understanding which gets us in
yes,
trouble.
it does get us in trouble. And, cortisol is so complex. It can be high when it's supposed to be low, low when it's supposed to be high, which happened to me a lot when I was doing competitions, because you bring your body fat down really low, you push really hard at the gym, and that hormone is one of the first things to dysregulate when you're going through that process. And then you start to get that kind of puffy look if you're not careful with cortisol, belly fat, all of the things. So, okay, so a woman comes and she's thinking, boy, I really need to do something. I've hit perimenopause. I'm having the hot flashes. Where does she start? Do you suggest that women first get tested and have an idea and then go into the herbs, or what do you suggest?
Yeah, if possible, having the test results, the data, that can definitely be useful. That being said, I wouldn't say that should stop anyone from getting started. You may just want to start with some of the simpler stuff. So Shazandra is one that's coming to mind right now. This is an adaptogen, and the word adaptogen has become pretty popular today. So these are herbs that help you to adapt better to stress. This came out of some Russian research, but it really kind of fits also into those ideas from the Taoist superior herbalism. These are ones that are non-toxic, and they're normalizing to a bunch of bodily functions, helping specifically with both physical stressors and mental stressors. So Sajandra is one of the great ones of these. It's right up there with ginseng or Eleuthero, Siberian ginseng, rhodiola. These ones can all be a little bit more stimulating, and Shazandra has some of that, but Shazandra really is a formula into itself. So it's helping with liver detox, which is really important, because we're all just assaulted with chemicals. And even if we weren't, like, the liver needs to process our own hormones. So a thing like hot flashes, that often means the liver is kind of backed up and needs some support. So Shizandra is good at helping this in really a multifaceted way. It's helping with cleaning up the blood. It's an adaptogen. It has mental clarity and mood supporting effects. It really does kind of hit on a whole lot of different things. So if the body is being supported in handling stress better and helping to increase liver detoxification, then the body's a bit better able to just handle the load of kind of the transition that the hormones are going through. So oftentimes why there's this hormonal disruption is the body's kind of backed up with all these different things. So instead of just throwing like new hormones on top, and again, that does have its place, but if we can kind of address the backlog of what's going in the body, then things generally will be smoother in the first place.
It might be a good option for perimenopause because that is a fluctuating period,
Mm-hmm.
and it's awfully difficult because I have clients doing this right now, working with their practitioner to get on hormone replacement therapy, but they no sooner get on, and because they're still cycling, they're still in perimenopause, and the estrogen's doing that. Oftentimes, it's not necessarily successful in the way that they had hoped because
Mm-hmm.
there's way too much fluctuation. Whereas in menopause, you're like I said, you're kind of flatlined, like everything's gone. And then boosting testosterone. I mean, how would a woman go about doing this? Because I know with me, mine really, it tanked. When I went through menopause, I had like none. And it was affecting, people think libido and all that kind of stuff, muscle, but it also affects your motivation. Like you just
Mm-hmm.
start feeling like, I don't want to do the thing anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, those are the main benefits as people think of libido, and it absolutely is important there. Muscle mass, but also bone mass. One of the reasons that women have more osteoporosis than men do is the testosterone in our bodies. So it definitely has an effect there. Estrogen plays a role in bone health as well, but I think testosterone actually plays a stronger one. And it is a neurohormone, so it's active in our neurology as well. So it's going to support energy, drive, motivation, just having a good mood overall. So as I was saying earlier, a lot of women are lower, even before menopause. I've seen some data saying that women in their 30s can have low testosterone as well. And again, because of the endocrine disrupting chemicals, a lot of these are or xenoestrogenic. So they're having these different disrupting effects. A lot of them are kind of taking us in a way where it's going to increase these different problems. So the best thing that I've found for supporting testosterone in both men and women is pine pollen. This is literally the pollen of pine trees. It's not well known as a supplement. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is pretty cool because it is a rich source of phytoandrogens. So a lot of people will have heard of phytoestrogens. These are the estrogenic compounds that are in flax, in hops, and in soy. And I think soy, if it's like over processed, can definitely be problematic. But if you're using it in a traditional way, which would be fermented, then it's not necessarily a problem. But a lot of foods, like even apple and coffees, like they pretty much all foods, a lot of foods have phytoestrogens, although it's in much smaller quantities than some of these more well-known ones. Phytoandrogens, for whatever reason, do seem to be a bit more rare, or maybe just science hasn't really looked for these as much. But pine pollen is like the best source of these. So these are compounds from the plants, completely natural, that will go in the human body, and they're able to talk to the receptor sites, able to actually act like testosterone mimics and kind of support the body in its own testosterone and phytoandrogen health. It's not just testosterone, but DHEA is it's called a weak androgen, but it's also known as the anti-aging hormone because it actually works like across the body in all sorts of different functions. So with something like pine pollen, it's going to really support the hormone system, specifically focusing on this kind of androgenic side, which again is important for both men and women. There are a couple different forms of this. The powder is kind of more of a superfood. In addition to these phytoandrogens, it is just loaded with nutrition. So people often notice like better recovery, just their immunity is better, better energy overall. But if you take a tincture, which is an alcohol extract of the pine pollen, this becomes much more directly boosting to testosterone. That's because the alcohol is able to draw out the phytoandrogens, and then you place it under your tongue. It's able to absorb straight into the bloodstream and bypass digestion, which tends to break down large molecules. So traditionally, this was like only recommended for older guys, but then it started getting recommended for younger guys because they needed support with the environmental stuff. And now we're actually recommending it much more to women as well, just in a lower dose, whereas a guy will typically take a dropper full, which is 30 drops twice a day. For women, the starting range will be like 1 to 10 drops. It kind of depends on, you can do a bit more if you know you have low testosterone, like you've actually done labs on that. If you just kind of suspect it based on the symptoms, then starting with that low dose and just kind of ratcheting it up over time is a good way. And this is just going to lend in that kind of natural support coming in from the outside, but help your system in some different ways. One last thing I'll say on that is that how this is helping is not just like coming into your system, but really helping. I think one of the large reasons is helping to detox, to get rid of a lot of these endocrine disrupting chemicals that we get from plastics, that we get in skincare. One of the reasons there's more hormone disruption in women is skincare. Like women use 10 times as much as guys do, and most of this stuff is just loaded with chemicals. If you're putting it on your skin, you're eating it. It's going into your bloodstream. And a lot of these have these chemicals which can disrupt the thyroid. You know, there's an epidemic of hypothyroid going on. It's definitely going to disrupt the sex hormones, the metabolism as well. One, definitely if you can limit this stuff, go towards more natural, and it can be a lot trickier than that. But also having some of this internal support of these herbs that can help kind of block and detoxify the endocrine disrupting chemicals is going to help.
I'm glad you touched on this because it is such a problem right now. I know I went to clean up my beauty products, my
Mm-hmm.
plastics. It's overwhelming. It's
Yep.
it's everything, and you almost have to do just one thing at a time. Like, okay, get the plastic out of the house. Okay, look at the beauty products. And then as a woman, I get frustrated because some of the natural beauty products don't work as
Right.
well. I'm going to be really honest. And so then you wind up going back to what you were doing before. And so it could be helpful then, you're saying, to have something that is supporting your body, and in particular, the liver. So important. I just did a challenge called Age Less. It was an Age Less reset, 7 days. And they were to focus on one habit per day. And one day we focused on the liver because I feel like if that's not addressed, like
Yeah.
even for losing body fat, I mean, your liver is so much part of a healthy metabolism, and that's crucial for longevity.
Absolutely. Yeah, the liver doesn't get as much of the respect because it literally has to process like everything that comes into the body. And it's a big job. And because, yeah, there's thousands of chemicals that are man-made these days that are just kind of released into the environment in our food, skincare, everywhere. Although the body is amazing in that it can handle this stuff and detoxify, again, it's that backload that is building up. So the thing is absolutely, it can be overwhelming to try to clean up everything, and because it's in the very air that we breathe, we're not actually going to be able to eliminate it completely, but you definitely can take steps. So, switching from drinking from plastic bottles to glass bottles, something like that can be just a simple, and that's going to lower your toxic load. Switching, if maybe some of the skincare you have to stick with, you have to do, but can you eliminate some of it? Just at least cut back. And those steps are going to make differences. Once you get in the habit with a new thing, you'll be able to look at what is the next step you're taking after that as well. But yeah, the more I've gotten to health, the more I've come to realize that, especially in today's age, like supporting our detoxification systems is one of the most important things that we can do, just because there's so much going on around us. And with the herbs, I was diving into the research behind them. And unfortunately, what happens in a lot of the research is they're torturing animals, essentially. They're doing it to create disease models. For instance, they're looking at Alzheimer's by giving aluminum toxicity to rats. And this creates what appears to be Alzheimer's in the rats. Then they're going to treat them with something in order to see if it works. The thing is, if you look at this kind of a big picture, and there's hundreds and thousands of cases of this, they are causing a disease by introducing toxicity. Then with herbs, in many cases, they're giving them the herbs, and that is going to slow down or stop the damage in many cases. This is true with the endocrine disrupting chemicals that I was talking about. So cystanche is one that's known really well for sexual function, but they're looking in rats that this could stop the damage to the reproductive system by the BPA that is in it, the bisphenol A, which many people have heard of because you're starting to see plastics that say BPA free. The problem is in many of those cases, they're replacing the BPA with BPF or BPS, which is basically a very similar molecule, which is going to have similar sort of effects. So again, this stuff is really tricky, but what I'm saying here is that by taking herbs and nutrients as well, like vitamins, minerals, these are definitely important for our detoxification as well. By really supporting our system by the nutrition we need, then you basically have this internal armor. Your body is better able to fight these compounds that are coming in from the inside, and it's better able to regulate itself so that your hormones aren't going like this, but maybe have a more even keel while they're still fluctuating and still being at hopefully ideal levels, but at least normal levels and not scraping the barrel levels.
Yeah, I'm going to shift just a little bit here. We're talking about the liver and we were talking about how fat loss, it's not going to happen. If your liver is not healthy, I mean, it is such a crucial part of metabolizing those protein, carbs, and fats, and then those methylation pathways as well. And I know some people don't methylate as
Mm-hmm.
well. Can you kind of speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a gene MTHFR, might be a 5 in there, that has a lot to do with our methylation. There are actually several other genes. I know my wife has these ones where if you have this gene in this one way, your methylation processes do not work nearly as well. So then with that, it can be harder to detoxify. In my wife's case, she has Lyme disease, had mold toxicity. We've really gone through the ringer in a bunch of stuff, and it has caused us to learn, how do you really support these pathways? Basically, with that, a common thing is, for instance, with B12, if you want to make sure you're getting a methylcobalamin versus the other forms that are out there, because this is going to have the methyl group, which someone with these genes will be able to utilize that form, whereas they may not be able to in other things. So it does get very complex from here. But again, really, if you can support this stuff with natural, healthy living, doing some other practices. For instance, we both use the infrared sauna, which is something that's going to help support the detox systems. But you also can't go too fast, too much. If you do an infrared sauna, especially in my wife's case, if she hasn't done one for a while and then does one, she's going to feel worse because it actually creates more of a backlog in the system. The body's trying to get rid of stuff, but can't actually let go of it as fast as it's kind of releasing from that. So there's all these little tips and tricks, but if you can just focus on a few things at a time and kind of build from there, then you'll be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the sauna, but you're right. I had back surgery over the summer and didn't do the sauna for several weeks, until I was really, starting to heal. And boy, I got in and I felt I just was wiped out. And I think that detoxification process, sometimes people don't realize that you can feel pretty crappy when you're detoxifying. Cellcore has some great products that I've used for detoxification of various things. And yeah, you can just feel terrible when when you're going through the process, and I've had clients go through it too. Now, what about weight loss resistance? Because
Mm.
that's a big one. And I see a lot of women in the late perimenopausal years where they're like maybe 47, 48, and that weight will not come off.
Yeah. So this ties into a lot of what we've already been talking about. So with the skincare, the endocrine disrupting chemicals, understand a lot of those are disrupting the thyroid hormone. And the thyroid is a large part of your metabolism. So in many cases, having low thyroid, the weight can just kind of stick on there. So that would be one area. But also the sex hormones are going to play a role in there as well. One of the things the body does with these chemicals from our environment is it shuttles them off to fat cells. And it does this because that's a good storage place for them. It's less disruptive for it to be there than to be in the organs or circulating through the blood. So the body is doing its best to protect you. So if the body is, if you're trying to consciously, you want to lose weight, you can be doing these things, but there's an overabundance of toxicity. Your body doesn't want to get rid of these fat cells because it is throwing toxins back into the system. And this is why that one of the reasons, because again, we're talking biology, so it's very complex. This is one of the reasons that weight can stick long because there's that toxicity. So supporting those detoxification pathways while doing the other things is going to allow the the backlog to kind of get out. So you have the backlog in the liver, but then there's this even bigger backlog in the fat cells because the body has just shuttled them off there. So once the liver gets supported and, eliminations through urination, through defecation, all this stuff, if it's moving out, then okay, we got the ability to pull some of these toxins out of the fat cells to be able to bring down our fat supply because it's safe to do so now. And this is going to help support the system. So again, you want to think on this, take a longer approach because you can't lose 30 pounds in 30 days, right? That may just be too much of a toxic load. Then you're going to feel like crap, which is going to kill your willpower. So then you're going to be binge eating. You're going to be fighting against yourself because this stuff is actually getting released into the system. So working on it in this way is going to help with weight loss as well.
So these are the obesogens that we
Mm-hmm.
hear about. I know with The Biggest Loser, that was one of the theories of them regaining weight. Of course, it wasn't sustainable, more than likely, what they were doing. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it was too rapid, too harsh, and the minute they ate regularly, here come the weight. But a lot of people have reflected on it being obesogens, and the body doesn't want these toxins in the bloodstream. So what's it going to do? Scoop them right back up and put them in the fat cells.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the reasons. And then just going from one environment back to your home environment, then you're just going to fall into those old habits. So it's really easy to get back into the same thing if those habits haven't been changed along the way. So, everyone wants to lose weight quickly, but really if you can just work on the small habits and, to start exercising, if you got to do just 5 minutes a day, that's the thing that gets the ball rolling. And then soon enough, 3 years down the line, you're having amazing results because you actually find that you love exercise rather than you hate it when you were trying to run for 2 hours at the start, right? So these small different changes in how you do things really long term, they change the trajectory of where you're going. And that's what we want with health.
Now, when I was reading through your bio, preparing for this
Mm-hmm.
podcast recording, I saw where your mom had cancer, and that was a major driving force, I guess, a catalyst in the direction that you took.
Yeah. So my mom passed from cancer back in 2009. She had it earlier and she was a nurse, so she went the completely conventional route and it did go into remission, but it only came back a few years later and then took her life at that time. So I was starting on my journey in fitness and health. And for me, that was kind of a catalyst in that, I saw Western medicine fail and take my mom's life. So I was definitely pushed into the alternative therapies and various treatments as well, and then just kind of coming to see that cancer is an industry and by all means there can be great people there, but stuck in a system that for me personally, like having witnessed this not just with my mom but other people, like chemotherapy and radiation or torture, that is
They
really
are.
the side effects of those are quite horrendous, and an argument could be made that they're worth going through, but I think there's definitely better routes out there. So my mom suffering in that way definitely kind of pushed me down this path further.
Yeah, I lost my father to cancer, and both of the cancers he had were immune system type cancers.
Mm-hmm.
One of the blood, and then the other was a very rare skin cancer. So I know, watching somebody go through that, it just has a profound effect on how you view things
Mm-hmm.
going forward. And he went through all of the things: radiation, chemotherapy, and ultimately lost his life. But it can really change how we view the system, watching a loved one go through there, for sure.
Yeah. And all the chemicals we've been talking about, so many of them are cancer causing, right? And it's not that you get a little bit of a chemical here and it's going to immediately give you cancer, but it is this backlog. We've been talking about the constant toxicity over the years that is going to make this much more likely. And sure, genetics it plays a role to some degree, but just because you have a gene doesn't mean you're going to get cancer. Whereas if you get enough of the certain kinds of chemicals, you're going to get cancer, essentially, if your body's not able to handle these. And then there's all the emotional components. So it is a complex picture. But doing the things we've talked about, not only is it going to help with like your performance today and your weight loss today, but it's preventative medicine. medicine that's going to be able to help you with all kinds of chronic disease, which, now is overtaking acute disease as far as taking people out. And the reason it is growing so much and why the USA has much worse than virtually any other country in the world is because we have a lot more toxicity going on here in many cases, because certain things are allowed here that are banned in European countries, for instance.
That's so true. That really frustrates me. And speaking about disease, I mean, one of the things that women are so at risk for is Alzheimer's, cognitive decline.
Mhm.
And when we go through menopause, we have these receptors in our brain. So men, of course, have more testosterone receptors in the brain, women more estrogen receptors. But men have this gradual decline. So it's gradually declining the testosterone, whereas women, it's like boom, off a cliff. And a woman can start to experience things like brain fog and cognitive decline. What types of herbs would be beneficial for them to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. The first herb that comes to mind is lion's mane mushroom. This is definitely a kind of hot and trendy one right now. Just in the last 10 years, it's become very popular, but it is being investigated for Alzheimer's and dementia. They're looking at this in various research studies across the world. So the cool thing about lion's mane mushroom is that it promotes nerve growth factor as well as BDNF. It's got a host of things that are doing a lot of different things, but essentially it is helping the nervous system, the brain, to kind of repair and rejuvenate itself a bit better. And it's just one of the really good ones for doing this. There are a variety of other herbs. Bacopa, that's one of my favorites. That is, I call it the number one herbal nootropic. With that, like for me, taking that, I can notice more mental focus come on right away. Like as soon as I taste it, I notice like more focus right there. So it's having a little bit of an immediate effect, but also this is being looked at for just how it's again, that's that herbal armor effect. So I mentioned Alzheimer's is being used in these rat research studies to cause Alzheimer's, right? So aluminum is a toxin to us, right? And if we're getting this from using aluminum cookware, for instance, or it's in our water supply, other places that it can be coming in from, this is one of the things the body has to handle, has to be able to detox. So these herbs and, of course, other nutrients as well will be able to help keep the nervous system much stronger. And, of course, everything else is going to play into that. The hormones, as you were saying, all these are very important. Again, it's my viewpoint. If we can focus on performance, so I'm taking these herbs to help my mental focus and concentration now, and I'm not really thinking about that, oh, in 40 years, like this could be preventing the cognitive decline that is coming then. But that's kind of the benefits of working with these superior herbs.
And I think too, making it part of your whole wellness program, because I often get women think, okay, if I just figure out the one thing, I'll lose weight. The one thing, my hormones will be balanced. It's never one thing. It's like, are you sleeping? Are you drinking water? Is that water pure?
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting the right kind of nutrition? Are you do you have muscle on your body? It's so many
All the
things.
foundations, yes, and you got to
Yes.
do them all because they're the foundations. You can't get away from them.
Yeah, and I find I'm 63 and I find the margin for error just gets smaller and smaller. Like you're young and you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of get away with these, some bad habits, I'm sad to say. And then with each decade, it's like, my goodness. And by the time you've gone through menopause, that margin for error is like everything matters. Sleep alone is is huge.
Yes, herbs and supplements will not make up for crappy sleep. Like you're not going to be able to do any of the things like weight loss isn't going to happen if you have horrible sleep. Your hormones aren't going to be ideal if you have horrible sleep. You're not going to be able to have good results in the gym and recover from that. If you have horrible sleep, like that is definitely one of the foundations. But as you're saying, like, of course, diet, and people tend to put all the focus on diet, but because there's so much baggage there, I like to focus on these other areas. Like, let's look at your sleep. Let's look at your water. Let's look at your toxic exposure. How are you breathing, right? Just the normal breathing patterns you have. Is it going through your nose? Are you breathing deeply? As well as working with specific deep breathing exercises. What's your stress relief looking like? What's your exposure to nature? Because sunlight is good for us, despite all the things saying like, oh, stay away from the sun or slather on toxic chemical sunscreen in order to block it out. We actually want not just the vitamin D, but it's producing other chemicals as well. Do we have an electrical connection to the earth via grounding? Just being out in nature, the sensory stimuli actually relaxes us. In Japanese research, they call this forest bathing, is the sensory stimuli and the compounds that are in the air have long-term effects on our health. So it's all these other things. Let's start here. Then I like to go to diet after that, because there isn't so much baggage on these other things. It tends to be a little bit easier for people to work with as a starting place. But then, of course, diet is important for the nutrients it provides, but also how much toxicity is it adding to us as well.
Yeah, diet's a tough one. And then the nutritional research is super frustrating because sometimes those studies are flawed.
Yep.
And one study is contradicting the other study. For instance, with fasting's a big one where you're just like, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to believe.
You
So
can
that
find
can be a hard
research to
one.
back up whatever opinions you have these
Yes.
days. It's
Yes.
unfortunately true.
Yeah.
Science shouldn't be like that, but that's how the game is played, unfortunately.
Yeah, I tell people if you're Googling, you're really Googling your point of view when you stop and think about it, and you're going to get all the things to support that point of view.
Hmm.
Now we've talked about a lot of different things here. Where does someone start? So let's say a woman, she's 50. Boy, I don't feel good, and she has no idea what herbs to start with. What does she do?
Yeah. So at my website, Lost Empire Herbs, we have something called Athena's Women's Formula. This was formulated specifically to just kind of cover all the bases. It has the Schizandra I was talking about, also the pine pollen, as well as several other herbs. There's Shatavari and Dong Quai, which are the number one herbs in Ayurvedic medicine and traditional Chinese medicine for women. So just that pairing alone is quite powerful. Then there's a couple other berries like goji and sea buckthorn as well. There's a focus on the hormone system because you have the phytoandrogens with pine pollen, but then phytoestrogens with shatavari. And then you have the adaptogen support, immunity support, mood support, energy support. Really, it actually touches on just about every base in the body. So this is a good one to just try out and see if it works for you. My whole viewpoint, because we're selling online, I'm like not working clinically with people where I'm doing a 2-hour intake. Doing that, I could give very directed calls to people, but instead with the website, just our opinion is try it, see if it works for you. If it doesn't, we have a 365-day money back guarantee. You don't need to send anything back. It's on us if it doesn't work for you. And by work for you, I mean you will have a tangible, feelable difference for it. You'll notice more energy. You'll notice different things going on. And of course, depending on what you use, it could be all over the place. But Athena, people will typically notice better energy. Libido may go up. Their mood is much better. The cognition, their sleep is better. All these different things because it is really touching on so much of the foundational stuff that we talked about. And the cool thing with that is, like, if you're struggling to get started, I like to say that herbs can be a quick start. In some ways, like if you don't have the foundations, like you're not going to get healthy, right? But sometimes you don't have the energy to work on those foundations. So if we can have something that actually like gives you a little bit more energy, it's like, okay, now I can get the ball rolling. So in many ways, the Athena can be a great one for that. So yeah, if you don't want to dig into anything else, like we have tons of information on the website, but just check that one out, try it out. If it doesn't work, then again, that money back guarantee is there. And if it does work, great. Like, we'll continue to be there and offer it for you.
Yeah, really looking at symptoms is big. My nurse practitioner has this list of different symptoms to look out for because she was saying sometimes, it's not as simple as testing the blood sometimes and going, okay, take this much estrogen or this amount of testosterone. It goes a lot individually, especially I think testosterone, how you feel. Like somebody might feel great on kind of a lower dose, somebody might need more.
Mm-hmm.
So going by those symptoms, doing a symptom checker on yourself is so important.
Yeah. And blood tests are great, if we can get that data, it's fine, but that doesn't actually tell us the picture of like what is the hormone receptors within your body and your
True.
cells. What about, is there a difference in the hormone receptors in your brain versus in your ovaries or your breasts? These things are all over the place and our science can't even really look at this stuff. So we can get these little snapshots that can hopefully point us in the right direction. But yeah, in many ways, symptomology can be a much better kind of guide to this stuff. And the thing with herbs is that they are quite safe, especially if we're working with these superior herbs compared to some of the like stronger ones where there's a lot more contradictions or contraindications on when you want to take them. So with these herbs, it's like they're not going to cause any sort of permanent damage. If you feel off just in taking it, stop taking it, and you're not going to feel off anymore. It really can be that simple as far as starting to play with these things. I've always believed in, you have to experiment for yourself. Even if there was science all pointed in the direction that this thing works, like ashwagandha works for lowering stress, like that is pretty well proven, and it does work for every person in all those studies. But the thing is, studies are averages. And that means that it's working for all these people, but these two people may have dropped out of the study because they had side effects or it wasn't working for them. These two people had a negative result. It just averaged out to better. So even if something is scientifically proven, it doesn't mean it's scientifically proven to work for you. That's why you got to experience it.
Bio-individuality, I always say this,
Mm-hmm.
rules.
Yep.
Because I've had outliers as clients, as health coaching clients, where you're giving them this advice and normally it would really work, and then for that individual not so much, and I see that quite often, and so really taking that into account is important.
That's part of the process. Is you try things out, like you have this data, you think it'll
Hmm.
work, and if it does, great, you can kind of double down, continue on that. If it doesn't, that's new information that you have feedback is, okay, let's try this other direction instead. That's part of the whole process. Like, no one knows, whether doctor or health coach or anyone, exactly what a different person should do. It's all just kind of informed opinion, and then the feedback cycle that goes from there.
Yes, I have a friend and colleague. She'll probably be listening to this, Dr. Tara Gunther. She's a psychologist, and she always says, get curious, get
Mm-hmm.
curious. And she'll say, I'm going to get curious. If I do this, what's going to occur? And I love that because you're not locked into something. You're just, again, back to listening to your body.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's how I kind of started this journey, is like, okay, I'm not strong, but I'm curious, how could I become
Yeah,
strong despite
is this
this
possible?
not great build to start with, right?
Well, this has been a delightful conversation, Logan. As we start to wrap up, was there anything that I didn't ask or that we didn't cover that you'd like the listeners to know?
I mean, there's so many paths we could have gone down, but I'll just say that, yeah, it really is about those small steps and trajectories. I mean, these days, with podcasts, we're awash in information. In fact, it can be like too much and kind of overloading us. So I would say, listeners, if you just found one thing that was kind of intriguing to you, that you heard here, that you want to investigate further, or listen to our intuition, right? Especially women's intuition is notoriously better than men's, right? Follow that intuition on what was the thing that stood out and maybe a good, appropriate next step. And if this is something small, like I'm going to reduce some of the plastic in my home and use glass instead, and you can just reuse some glass jars you get from other foods instead of Tupperware, for instance. Something small like that, if you even just take one thing, then I'd say this conversation was worth it.
Ooh, really good advice. I'm always saying that. I'm saying do one thing, just one thing. Then you know what works and what doesn't work, and
Mm-hmm.
habit stack and move on to the next. So, really good advice. If listeners would like to follow you, learn more about you, and perhaps check out some of these herbs, where should they go?
Yeah, lostempireherbs.com is the website for that. Tons of herbal information, health information there, blogs, videos, all kinds of stuff. On the fitness side, I have another website, legendarystrength.com. And you can find me on some of the social media channels, either at Lost Empire Herbs or Strongman Logan is what I go on Instagram, for instance.
Great. Thank you so much, Logan. I'll have all of this in the show notes. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Carol.
And to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.